Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de whether I agree with our current White House resident ghoul's assertion that essentially might makes right in the real world, and what the logical conclusion to that mindset will lead to. Hey, Zempak here. So right off the bat, I have to state that I think the ghoul, by the way, Stephen Miller, is a terrible waste of space. Not a real person, but, you know, a real gosh darn ghoul. I wish nothing but ill towards this dude. Look him up, okay? He's the definition of a weenie, and I hope he rolls down all the stairs he ever come across, okay? Yeah, sorry, not sorry, but most famously recently, he's in the news for saying this quote, okay? He said, "We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else, but we live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power," end quote. Huh. Now, am I crazy, or isn't this just the philosophy of, I don't know, might makes right? I guess I should be happy that one of our leaders is just blatantly spelling out such a simple retrograde political philosophy in the modern age. Now, people on the left, of which I count myself most of the time, would have a knee-jerk reaction to condemn such a statement, but it actually got me start thinking as a fan of history. I mean, is he right? Does the real world really just run on power and we've forgotten all about that? After all, I mean, right now there's an invasion in Europe, some arguable occupation in parts of the Middle East, and even a most recent US incursion into a foreign state, and all of them has been met with what? No real armed escalation, outside of the local region, right? So aggressors generally are coming out on top. So isn't that the proof in the pudding? I mean, if you're strong, you simply go take what you want, and apparently that's that. Hang on a second though, okay. History isn't written in the here and now, but usually in retrospect, right? So I'd argue we don't know how any of these various conflicts or actions will turn out without the hindsight of at least a few decades, okay? Luckily for us, we do have plenty of actual historical examples of this so-called might makes right philosophy, and I'm going to give a few international examples, a couple of domestic ones as well, and then give you an opinion about whether I think this type of political philosophy can work, or rather, whether ultimately it is beneficial or harmful for the state involved. Okay, so if you enjoy some random rants from a dude with no production skills, clearly like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever. I'll be great regardless, because I just do these for funsies. Hit that bell icon. I don't know where that is, but I'm asking you guys to do something that I don't know because I'm a casual hypocrite on a rather minor internet detail. So let's first start with the international examples, right? Historically, the Mongolians took over China. Yep, that happened almost 1,000 years ago, right? China was already a great power at the time, but guess what? Militarily, it was outmatched by the superior tactics and strategy and cohesion of the Mongolian horde. Can't get around it. You cannot hold your cities, you lose them, right? I'm absolutely positive no Chinese people at the time asked to be rolled over by an army of horse archers. But it did indeed happen, okay? Don't think that they didn't try diplomacy during that era, right? And that failed miserably. No amount of bribe became enough, despite the fact that China was a vastly richer state on paper, right? It lost because it didn't have the military power. Full stop. Second example, British takeover, the subcontinent of, what is now called India, right? I'm just going to call it India for brevity's sake. Now, as it was back then, it was also a very populous and well-established region, but once again, it became a vassal state for a power that has absolutely zero rights to be there. It isn't even really about that specific region, right? The entire history of the British Empire at its apex is a textbook lesson in people just taking what they can hold. India is simply its largest prize and most significant historical legacy at this point, right? Also, by the way, you do know that Brits were likely the greatest drug dealers in the history of the world, right? Forget about cartels. The British Empire, that's the biggest. So, using that drug money to bully local governments for hundreds of years, and to this day, there are still fans of this criminal family because they call themselves a monarchy? Another direct proof that if you're winning with guns, you're winning, at least for a time. Okay, we're going to get to that later. But hey, I'm in the United States, right? Most of my audience probably is too. So who cares about old historical examples from who knows when? So let's talk about how the USA, our land of exceptionalism, has acted in terms of territorial expansions prior to now, okay? I mention these because, I see the left scoffing at the idea that our current orange douche of a leader wanting to just take over Greenland for apparently no real reason. But let's look at Exhibit A and B that I'm going to give in the history of this country, right? How did we add Texas, for example, to our country? Because we beat Mexico in a war, essentially. That is it. Area used to be Mexico, but they lost the war, and the whole batch of their country became the USA instead. In fact, all of Mexico could have been taken over, but that's a different story for a different day, right? But an even worse example is how we got Hawaii. That area literally had its own government and its own monarchy. But then when American business interests conflicted with the local government, guess what? The United States sent in troops, took over that whole series of islands. Goodbye, the old kings and queens of Hawaii. History and local culture be damned, right? What these foreign states lacked was, once again, a real comparable military force. We just took those states, right? Texas, which currently is one of the largest states in the nation, and Hawaii, our most remote state. We took it for no real polite reasons that any modern person would recognize. We took it because it was good for us financially and because we could. So yeah. Now, having been reminded of that, why wouldn't Greenland be out of the question? Right? We're taking it because we can. But here's my real, what I'm trying to drive towards, right? The crux of it. It's easy to see historically nations simply took what they wanted, but does it work in the long run, right? Let's look at what happened to our historical examples. Mongols were out of China in a handful of generations and currently sit in the middle of nowhere in terms of national relevance in the modern age. The Brits got their empire dissolved because some other major power got so jealous of the British empires that they starting multiple world wars that ultimately bankrupted the Brits' ability to maintain their global dominance. So yeah, it didn't work so well for those two. But the United States has been killing it. We just keep getting bigger and bigger, and these days we don't even pretend to have a polite reason for taking our neighbor's stuff, other than, well, we have bigger guns. So will that trend continue for the US, right? The problem with threatening everybody else with superior military is that, well, you lose friends that way, and nobody stays on top forever. The greatest empires in history were felt by seemingly minor inconveniences, okay? Now, the United States is often compared to, the Roman Empire in terms of power and influence. Just remember that Rome fell through asymmetrical warfare against a whole conglomerate of raiding powers only, okay? So frankly, that's likely the ultimate end for American expansionisms too, if we're simply taking other people's stuff because we can. And yes, we can take over lots of places, but without a cohesive plan and allies, boy, nobody can stand alone in this world. If any of the world wars has taught anybody anything, I hope that lesson someone remembers, at the top of the country, okay? Now, in conclusion, I think it's naive for the left to look at Stephen Miller's quote and call him, a nut job, an insane person. He's right, it's been that way since time immemorial. However, it is not the only way, and there's a reason why most modern states will at least jazz up the reason to interfere in foreign states. Because if you don't, well, to be honest, you're just telling your own populace that that is acceptable behavior. In which case, might makes right can work at a lower personal level too, right? Everybody has guns in the USA, supposedly, right? It'd be utter chaos if we took our leader's philosophy in territorial expansion to heart at a local personal level, right? We'd have a total breakdown of law and order, and that's ultimately the biggest risk to might is right. At some point, there will be a tipping point, and none of us will be able to return from it. And that's just sad for, your personal sphere or the entire world. I got no prompt for comments on this one. This is just my rant. Cheers. I'll approach it.